Hi guys, me Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and in today's video I'm going to show you how you can paint this really cute little fall landscape with the pumpkin and the fence and the tree. And there's a lot of different techniques in here, and we can do it all here with round brushes. I want to show you how you can paint this step by step, so please follow along with me and let's have fun painting. Alright guys, I'll just quickly go over my supplies that I've got here. I've got my Daniel Smith watercolors and a couple little ceramic palettes, my 2 jars of water. One I'll use to wash my brush out for my dirty water, and I have a clean water for dipping into my paint. I have a Fabriano Artistico watercolor cold press block. This is the traditional white. It's 100% cotton, size 5x7. I have paper towel, and my brushes are these Princeton Neptune series brushes. I've got the 1/2-inch wash brush and a round 4 and a round 8. And I've got a water-soluble pencil from Faber-Castell. They call them the Graphite Aquarelle, and I have the hardest lead that will make the softest amount of mark. It's the HB. If you go up to 2, 4, 6, 8, the higher the number, the softer the lead and the darker the mark you'll get. So this is the lightest, and then I won't be able to see through it. I'm just going to quickly use this pencil just to sketch out some of the main, oh no, a little bit, well, we'll have to do some red leaves. I had some little bit of red on there. I'm going to have a tree. And I will share my reference photo for you. I'll put a link. I just found it on Pinterest. I think it's from a magazine or a Tumblr or something. I'm not really sure. I just found this on Pinterest. This kind of used as a reference photo. It's basically a tree with some fall leaves and then a fence with a pumpkin at the bottom. So, and then there's leaves all around it. I'm just going to kind of do the bottom of my tree. They're just going to come straight up here. And then I'll have leaves all up here. And then the fence, instead of, we don't want it to be straight, because in the picture it's coming at an angle. So as it gets closer to you here, where the picture is taken from this corner, it's going up and getting closer. So I am going to make that angle just like in the picture. And instead of, the post kind of just comes off here. So just kind of try to follow the way that picture goes. And then as you do your lines, make sure that they're at the same angle for each subsequent row of the fence row. And then this one, the pumpkin is kind of blocking the fence for that bottom one, so it's not going to show. And then that post comes down like so. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of briefly draw in a little bit of the pumpkin here of how big I want it. And then that'll have leaves all around it. And leaves coming all down here. Alright, so let's start off by doing our sky. And some of our pencil line might just kind of wash away here on the fence. So I just wanted to do some general lines of where that's going to be. And I know that's hard to see on the camera. I'll move it up a little bit closer. Maybe you can see my pencil lines a little better. Basically drew the tree, my fence, pumpkin, and then everything else will be painted in. So I'm going to take my flat brush, get some clean water, make sure that brush is clean. Sometimes I don't get it all the way rinsed out from a previous painting sometimes. Alright, so I'm just going to do the sky. So I'm going to not go on the tree here. I don't need to go over where the pumpkin is. The sky is showing through these fence posts. Down here, I'd be seeing grass. I'm just going to do that empty area between the fence slats and then up above. And if you go over the fence post, that's fine. We're going to be going over it with quite a dark color, so it will not show through as much. Making the sky is going to be the lightest color on the page, and we want to do kind of like that fall hazy gray color. So I'm going to make up my own gray. I'm going to use some ultramarine blue. I've got a huge mess here all over my palette, so I'll just kind of, it might have a little hint of a green to it because I had a little bit of green on my palette there. And then I'm going to take some burnt sienna and mix that in. Add a little more blue. I had an awful lot of green still in that well there. So I want like kind of a grayish blue color. So just kind of mix together burnt sienna and ultramarine, or you can do any kind of like orange color with the blue. Those are the way they sit on the color wheel. You're mixing that secondary color that is not a variation of blue with that blue, so you'll end up with a gray. So now I've got a nice light gray, and I'm just gonna fill that in where I wet that down. So that'll spread really nicely, and I won't end up with a bunch of streaks. So that is why we wet that down first. All right, now I've got my nice gray, fall gray sky in the back. And if you want it to be a little brighter blue, go ahead, just add a little more blue. We could go up here, it could be a little more blue on the blue side. Basically, when we're doing around this fence, we just want to make sure that we have all of that area covered that's behind the fence panels or the boards on the fence. Okay, so clean my brush out there. And I do have my heat tool really handy here on my desk, always plugged in, so I'm just going to go ahead and dry that. Or you can just wait for that background to dry, because if we don't wait for that to dry or dry it with a dryer, when we go to start doing the tree, it's going to bleed into our sky area, and we don't want that. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do my pumpkin next. I'm going to start out with the stem. I'm going to use some of the sepia, or just whatever really dark brown color you have. I already had some on this palette here. I had a lot of fall painting going on here, so I already had a lot of these colors out. All right, I'm going to start out by doing my little bit of my stem here. And I add a little curve to it. I'm not quite filling that all the way in. I'm going to take a lighter brown. This was some burnt umber here, and I just want to kind of do a little bit of a mix here. It might be a little bit bigger than the one that's in the picture, but that's all right. Okay, so kind of just make your stem. You can mix together some browns, give it a nice little textured marbled effect. And then we're going to go ahead and do our pumpkin. Now, the pumpkin in the pictures are really bright orange, and there's a shadow on it, so the light is coming from this way. So it's going to be lighter on this side and then darker on this half of it. And it's got nice thin little segments that we can do. You can try to copy it and try to be really realistic with it, or we can just go with the idea of this as we're just using it as a reference. I'm not trying to paint it and make a photographic painting. I just want to use that as my, just for my layout mainly. So we don't need to do this really, really detailed pumpkin, but I do want to use the shadow as an example here, so we can add more layers. So now for my orange, I don't like that really bright orange pumpkin. I want to do more of a burnt orange color. So I have a nice convenience color here in my Daniel Smith colors. It's this Quinacridone deep gold right here. You can see it's a really, really pretty, like deep golden orange, golden color that's really great for pumpkins. If you don't have something like that and you want to mix some of your own, I suggest maybe doing yellow ochre and mixing that with a brown. Such like burnt sienna that's more on the orange side. You can mix together different yellows and reds until you get an orange that you really, really like. But if you're wanting it to be more on the burnt orange side, you'll want to add a little bit of brown, or just start off using those earthier colors like yellow ochre that will give you that really rich, deep color that you want. So But I found that this Quinacridone Deep Gold is like the perfect burnt orange pumpkin color for me that I really like. So I'm using my round size 4 again here. I think I forgot to mention that when I started doing the stem, but I'm going to start out doing the center of my pumpkin. And we're going to start out by just doing kind of an oval shape and just fill that in. And then we'll do some shading over the top of it after we get all of our segments in here. So then I'm just going to continue around and not go quite as far for my next one. I'm just going to leave the slightest little white line just to separate my segments. And then as I get around, I'm just going to start moving above it and then not go quite as far. And I'll try to zoom in my video here when I edit it later so that you can see a little more closely what I'm doing. And you don't need to do a lot of segments. If you just want to do 3 or 4 and just make it kind of a nice fat pumpkin, you don't need to do these really thin little segments if you don't want. I'm just kind of doing a little variation of what I saw in my picture. And even then we're going to have a bunch of leaves that we can kind of just overlay over the top of this too. All right, when I get up here, we're not seeing the whole back segment, so I'm actually just gonna make like kind of like a little crescent-y type of a piece right there. So that's where my my top. So I'm seeing those back layers there. I wish I knew some pumpkin terminology here and what to tell you what these the parts of the pumpkin are. Are they lobes, or I'm not really sure. All right, so I'm not very concerned right now about the shadows because I'm going to do another layer over top. So if you end up with some darker pieces and lighter, we can always just layer more layers of color over the top. I'm just trying to make it pretty symmetrical. I think I might add actually just a little bit more right here. Do one more row. Get a little wider. And you can really change the shape of your pumpkin based on this first. When you're starting out, you can make it really more circular, tall, skinny oval, and it'll really change the shape of your pumpkin up. So I'm just making those little marks at the top just to kind of show that the back side is there. And I'm just going to start going over top of some of these layers on this side as that's starting to dry a little bit, just to put that shadow in. And to blend that in, I'm just, I rinsed my brush. This is still a little bit wet, so I have some workability with it. I rinsed my brush off and I'm dabbing majority of the water off of my brush so that I can just kind of blend that into that still damp layer. So then I can get my nice shadow going across this side. And if you start to lose your segments here, like you're not leaving, I left a little tiny white line just as a little highlight to really show the different segments of the orange here, not orange, the pumpkin. So now I'm getting that darker look here. I think this one I had a little bit less water on my brush when I did that row, so if I still don't like how the colors look, I can just go back over this again when it's dry. All right, I'm going to divert my attention to the tree right now. This is a little bit larger area. I'm going to switch over to my round 8 just to give myself a little bit more water to work with. Ooh, I still have a bit of green in this brush from painting bamboo yesterday. All right, I'm going to try to get some clean water on here. Oh, I've already got some green going in here. That's all right. And you always try to clean your brushes as best you can, and sometimes there's just a little bit of paint left in there. You can't help it. All right, so I've wetted that down, and I'm gonna just lay a nice light brown wash on here. And I have, I've already been using some burnt umber, so I'll just go ahead and stick with that. Get a little bit more of that. All right, I'm gonna dilute that down some just to make sure I get a nice light color. I'm just going to do a nice light wash of this burnt umber across this, and then we'll add some details over the top. You can kind of just fade it off into the bottom here because we're going to be covering that up with leaves. In fact, we'll go ahead and work on that wash right now too. So I'm just going to go back over that again. Avoid hitting the pumpkin as much as possible. Just kind of go right up to the edge of it and just leave a white gap. I had whatever that red stuff was that was on my brush earlier. Must have been a little piece of dried color or something. Okay, so in my picture you can see some grass poking through here, so I'm just going to do some leftover sap green there. I'm just going to kind of do a quick little wash right there, and then we can add some texture to that later. Make that edge just kind of straight because my fence row is right there. My fence board. And my sky is pretty dry up here, so I can also start working on doing some of that. The branches and the leaves that are kind of at the top here. So I want to do kind of like that golden yellow color. So I'm going to go with some yellow ochre. And we'll use some of this for the leaves down at the base of the tree as well that have fallen. So we'll do some yellows, browns, and oranges down there. And we can do a little bit of green mixed in with that as well. So I'm just using the round 8, and I'm just going to do some little dab lines. I'm not going to go on the trunk because these are just hanging down from behind. You can see in the reference photo that we have a solid trunk, and then this is showing from behind the tree. So I'm just going to make some dabs, and I want the sky to be poking through a little bit, so we're just seeing the branches through the tree. And I guess I could do some other brushes in here, some technique brushes if you wanted, but I wanted to try to get us to what a lot of people would have on hand, and you don't necessarily have a lot of these really fancy technique brushes, but we could also use a deerfoot brush to make the texture of the tree leaves, but we can just do this just as fine with a round brush. You just get a little bit different effect. I want to add a little bit of green in there. I have some, this is green gold. I just always run out of places on my palettes here, and then I eventually have to clean them. So I'm going to do a little bit of that green gold, but I just want to darken that up a tiny bit with some more yellow. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that yellow ochre to it, and then just kind of add that in there with that. Just kind of go all around it. So then we have some leaves. Keep adding a little more yellow. We could do a little bit of brown in there, to give that a little more dimension and vary it up, and try to go up over your edge. If you don't have a watercolor block and you just taped it, you just want to maybe go over your tape edge so that you get all the way at the top and you don't have a gap at the top here. Alright, so I'm going to switch over to my round 4, and then I want to add in a few branches here. So I'm going to go back to that really dark, that sepia color. And I just want to add a few little random branches in here. And just so in some of those spaces you can have some branches coming out and sticking out of the... And in the reference photo there's like a big branch coming down like this and going around. And it just kind of bleeds into my still wet leaves here, that's fine. Just kind of think about which way the branches will be going. So we have this tree above us and they're sticking out in all different directions. So just try to vary it up a little bit. Okay, so there's that. I still have the round floor. I'm going to go back to that really dark brown and I'm going to work on adding some texture to my tree. So I want to just add the trunk lines. I'm just going to go over this with different shades of brown and I'm just going to make some vertical lines and kind of go wavy across it just to give that the illusion of some texture for the trunk of the tree. And if you want to go another wash a little bit darker for your base, you can do that as well before you start doing those lines. And I'm just overlapping. I just keep going back over the top. And you can do darker and lighter browns just to give this a lot of texture and dimension. So I'm going to go back over to that kind of medium brown, that burnt umber. I'm going to do some lines in that as well. And just vary up the thickness. So do that by just how much pressure you're using on your brush. Or you can go use some smaller brushes too, like a 1 or a 2 round would be good. But I'm just doing some really light pressure just to get the very fine tip of my paintbrush here. Just giving some random lines here just to fill that in. And I'm still leaving some of the really light color that we did as our underwash. I'm letting some of that poke through so that you can really see the different colors that are in the trunk naturally. So just going right up against the edge of my pumpkin there, and then I'm just kind of letting that fade out because we're going to cover that all up with leaves here on the bottom. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and add in my fence. So I'm going to keep using that sepia color, or you could do a really dark, really dark brown, or mix a little bit of black if you want to. This is kind of almost like a silhouette, but it's really dark on this side of the fence. Then after that's dry, I will go back over that again and we can do a couple more lines just to give that a tiniest bit of texture. Looks like in my reference photo there might be like some nail holes or something in there too, so there's a lot of things you could do to give that a little more texture. All right, next step would be to add all of our leaves at the bottom. So I'm going to go back over to my round 8, and then we'll just kind of copy the same technique we did up here with the tree. And if you want to, you could add some bigger shapes here because the leaves are quite a bit bigger. They're in the foreground, so they're going to show more. So we can just do some bigger kind of shapes like that. I'm going to start just doing some of this, the yellow ochre. I'm just going to add that in some different pieces. And with this, we really want to cover all of that white space. So this yellow ochre can kind of be a lot of our background. And then we can do maybe that same orange that our pumpkin is, that quinacridone gold. I can add some of that in there, a little bit of the green, and really just let it all kind of mix together and be a big marbled effect. Do some brown. Okay, so there would be like just our first layer. Come up into the base of that tree, and then we can add a little more detail over the top there. I'm just making a big ugly mess there. All right, so I've got this little grassy area here. I'm gonna go back over to that round 4. Got a little bit of the sap green. Mix that with that little bit of that greeny gold color. I'm just gonna kind of make a little bit of texture, I guess, just by giving that another layer over the top, and then just giving, sorry, I cannot find my words today. Just leaving a little bit of that underwash color poking through just to give that a little more texture. I'm going to go ahead and dry that so that I can do another layer over the top. Okay. That's pretty dry. I am going to go back over this with some more layers just to give myself some more leaves here. So I'm going to get some more of that burnt umber. And it doesn't really seem like a lot of the leaves in here are like a golden brown color, and there's a few yellow and there's some really dark spots. And just kind of add in some simple leaf shapes over the top here. Just kind of have them overlap the pumpkin a bit. I'm going to get some of that sepia as well, because in my picture that I'm using as my reference, there's a lot of really dark areas. Some of that gold and orangey color. Now here's where we're going to leave a lot of blank areas because we don't want to completely cover that wash that we laid underneath. This is just like the background that you can see. That there's piles and piles of leaves there. Just kind of vary up the direction of your little simple leaf shapes. I'm really just kind of dabbing down and leaving a point to make some tiny little leaf shapes here. I mean, I'm not trying to go for painting every single leaf detail that I'm seeing in the reference picture. I just want to add some leaves at the bottom. Okay. Add a little bit more here. Maybe a few more that kind of overlap this grassy area too. And around the base of this fence a little bit more. Okay. There, I really like how that's turned out. And I think I just want to add one more layer now that this is dry. I just want to add a little bit more of that orange in there. I feel like it needs a little more of that color. It's looking a little brown. Add a little bit more of that green too. And if you feel like you want to add any more branches in there, go ahead. Otherwise, I really like how that turned out. It's a really, really cute little fall landscape, and this would make a really pretty card as well. So I hope you had fun painting along with me, and please share your projects with me. If you painted one of these pumpkin landscapes with the tree, I would love to see it. You can tag me on Instagram, Mrs. Hand Painted. Have a great day, guys.